I used to hold on to the idea that love alone could shield you from betrayal. That if you poured your heart out, devoted your time, trust, and everything else to someone, they'd never turn their back on you. That illusion shattered the night I stepped into that house. It all started with a message from a number I didn't recognize. Just a few words, but they hit like a punch. You deserve to know the truth. Come to 1428 Oak Ridge Drive, Saturday at 8 p.m. Bring a date. Initially, I brushed it off as a mistake, maybe a bad joke. But the unease that followed was impossible to ignore. My wife, Lorna, had been acting strange for quite some time. Her explanations were always conveniently ready: late hours at work, spontaneous getaways with friends I'd never met, and a suddenly password-locked phone that had never needed protection before. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that I was just being overly suspicious. But somewhere deep inside I already knew the truth. So, I did what anyone would do when suspicion turns to dread. I tracked the number. When the name attached to it popped up, my hands trembled. Paula Green. Maybe meaningless to most, but for me it was a thunderclap in a silent storm. Paula was Nathan Green's wife, Nathan, the colleague my wife always described as nothing more than a friend. That's when the puzzle started coming together. Paula wasn't just suspicious, she knew. And she wanted me to know too. I had a choice to make: ignore it all and keep pretending, or confront whatever secrets were about to surface. I chose the latter. That Saturday, I went to the address in the message, and I didn't go alone. When we reached the front door, I pressed the bell, inhaled deeply, and gripped Paula's hand tighter. If my wife had been weaving lies all this time, she was about to learn she wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Even from outside, the sound of soft music and cheerful chatter floated through the walls. It was the kind of setting that might fool anyone into believing everything was just fine. But I wasn't fooled. I knew my wife had been living a separate life, one that didn't include me. Paula stood at my side, her hand firmly clasping mine. Though she hadn't said much on our way over, I could feel her stress vibrating through the silence. She had stopped hoping for the best long ago. While I had been clinging to denial, she had been gathering evidence. And now she was ready to expose the whole mess. I wasn't sure what we'd find once that door opened. But what greeted us still managed to catch me off guard. Nathan Green answered. The second he saw me, the color drained from his face. Panic set in, obvious and raw. He hadn't expected me to show up, and certainly not flanked by his own wife. There was a long, tense pause before Nathan tried to regain control. Hey, man, he said with forced cheerfulness, stepping aside. Didn't know you were coming. Come on in. Paula gave a cold, humorless laugh. Didn't know? That's interesting, since my name somehow didn't make it onto the guest list. His eyes flicked nervously toward the crowd behind him. I followed his gaze. The house was full, bathed in golden light, people laughing and sipping champagne, completely unaware of the storm heading their way. And then I saw her, Lorna. She stood near the bar, mid-laugh, her glass raised, looking effortlessly beautiful. Her hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless, as though she'd spent days preparing for this night. But one thing struck me more than anything else: her left hand was bare. No wedding ring. Pain clawed at my chest. She hadn't seen me yet. She was too busy getting cozy with a man I barely knew, one of Nathan's friends. The way her hand lightly traced his arm made it clear this wasn't their first time. She was too comfortable. Too familiar. Beside me, Paula shifted slightly. Ready? She asked, her voice low and steady. I swallowed hard, nodded, and stepped inside. Nathan had barely moved aside when I entered, Paula close behind me. The moment my feet touched the polished wood floor, everything changed. Conversations faded, heads turned, and I could feel the curiosity in their eyes. Who is that? Why does he look like he's about to explode? Then Lorna noticed me. Her expression froze. The color drained from her cheeks. Her fingers trembled around her glass. That face, I've only seen that kind of fear when someone realizes the truth has finally caught up with them. I locked eyes with her, refusing to break the gaze. I wanted her to feel the weight of the lies, the cold betrayal, every moment I had sat in silence while she lived another life. The silence between us stretched out, heavy and bitter, until finally she whispered, her voice barely carrying, "What are you doing here?" I didn't reply. Instead, I gave her something far more powerful than words. I smiled. Then, slowly and with purpose, I turned my head to Paula and reached for her hand. Gasps rippled through the room. A sudden crash echoed through the room. Someone's drink had hit the floor. Lorna's gaze shot toward us, her eyes wide with panic. I watched as her expression shifted, confusion giving way to a dawning horror. For the first time, she understood that the upper hand was no longer hers. I leaned in, just enough for my voice to reach her like a blade. Thought I'd return the favor, darling. And just like that, the Real celebration kicked off. Lorna remained motionless, the blood draining from her face so rapidly I feared she might collapse. The glass she held slipped from her grasp and shattered, but she didn't so much as flinch. Her eyes jumped from me to Paula and then back again, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I stood my ground, completely still, letting her feel the full weight of what was unfolding. Around us, whispers filled the room, increasing in volume as the atmosphere thickened with tension. People shifted, stealing glances, trying to figure out the story or confirming what they already suspected. Some looked puzzled, while others wore knowing expressions. At last, Lorna managed to speak, though her voice trembled and cracked. What is this?" she asked, almost too quietly to hear. Standing beside me, Paula let out a soft, ironic chuckle. "You tell us, Lorna. We're just guests at this party." Lorna's head snapped toward her, and in that instant I saw something in her eyes I never had before, true fear. She wasn't just discovered, she was spiraling, losing the control she had held so tightly for so long. Nathan, still lurking near the doorway, looked like he wanted to disappear into the wall. He kept silent, probably because he had no clue how to escape the disaster he was now a part of. I felt every stare fixed on us, the entire room suspended in breathless anticipation. But I wasn't going to break. I stepped closer to Lorna, closing the gap between us. "Surprised to see me?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. Her lips parted as if to answer, but nothing came out. "I get it," I continued, tilting my head slightly. "Why would you expect me? It's not like we're married or anything, right? It's not like you vowed to stay loyal. Not like you've been sneaking around with someone else." Her mouth opened again, hands trembling now. "It's not." "Don't," I interrupted firmly. "Not here. Not in front of everyone. Let's not pile on more embarrassment than you've already brought on yourself." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Lorna's breathing grew shallow, her chest rising and falling quickly. The air felt electric, as if the room might explode at any moment. Then Paula lit the match. "You know," she said with a sweetness that couldn't hide the bite in her voice, "I kept wondering why my husband's been so busy. Turns out he found time for someone else's wife. I guess that explains why he had none for me." Nathan finally found his voice, but it cracked with panic. "Paula, can we talk about this privately?" She whipped around so quickly that he actually took a step back. "Privately?" she repeated, her laughter sharp and bitter. "Oh, now you care about privacy? That's rich, Nathan. Really rich." Lorna looked like she might shatter right there. She turned toward me, her voice breaking into a whisper. "Please. Can we talk somewhere else?" I leaned in a fraction. "You didn't mind doing this in front of everyone before, Lorna. What's changed now?" Her lip trembled as she visibly crumbled. I let her unravel. Then I turned, deliberately taking Paula's hand again. Lorna recoiled like she'd been struck. But I wasn't finished. I scanned the room and locked eyes with a few people I knew she had spread rumors to, people who had believed her lies. Loud enough for everyone to hear, I said, "Should have known something was off when she stopped wearing her wedding ring, huh?" Silence fell like a blanket. Heavy. Suffocating. Then the murmurs returned, louder, more animated. The truth was sinking in, faces lit with realization. Lorna instinctively lifted her hand to cover her bare ring finger, but it was too late. The truth had landed and there was no taking it back. Her carefully built image was shattering before everyone's eyes. She looked like she was drowning, gasping for any kind of escape, but none came. The crowd's quiet judgment pressed down on her. Years spent cultivating the perfect persona, loyal wife, gracious host, ever-charming socialite, were crumbling right there in front of her. She took an unsteady breath, moved closer, and gently reached for my arm, hoping her touch could somehow erase what had just happened. "Can we please go outside and talk?" she whispered, barely louder than the buzz of gossip swirling around us. I remained still. Her fingers brushed my sleeve, but I stepped back with purpose. She inhaled sharply, the meaning of that one move crystal clear. "Talk about what?" I asked, my voice even. "Your excuses? Your attempts to spin the truth? Or maybe you just need time to come up with a better lie, since the one you had clearly didn't land." Nathan, who had been hovering on the sidelines like a man witnessing his own downfall, finally stepped forward. His voice was shaky, strained with unease. "Listen, this really isn't the right time or place for any of this," he said, trying to sound reasonable. "Maybe we should all just take a moment to calm down?" Paula slowly turned to face him, her movements deliberate, her eyes cold. "Take a step back," she repeated, her tone laced with disbelief. "Now you want to play peacemaker? Where was all this thoughtful concern while you were busy sneaking around behind my back?" Nathan's jaw tightened. He hated confrontation, especially when caught in a corner by someone just as intelligent and unyielding as he was. I could tell he was searching for a way to wriggle free, but there were no exits left. Meanwhile, Lorna wasn't ready to surrender. She stood straighter, shaking out her hands like a performer preparing for a difficult act. A nervous, forced smile tugged at her lips as if she believed she could charm her way out of this disaster. Then, in a move so audacious it nearly earned my respect, she turned to the crowd and raised her voice just enough to carry. "Everyone," she called out, her tone laced with desperate cheer. "I think there's been a major mix-up. Here we go." She let out a clumsy chuckle, trying to steer the narrative. "This is just a huge misunderstanding." "Really? My husband and I," she gestured toward me like we were co-stars in this drama now, "we've been going through a tough time. And I guess someone saw something and misunderstood it." People exchanged skeptical glances, their expressions uncertain. She must have noticed the doubt in their eyes because she pushed harder, leaning into the role of a misunderstood wife. "I mean, come on, all of you know me," she pleaded, her voice trembling slightly. "You know I'd never do anything like that." She paused as if overwhelmed by emotion, then let out a shaky laugh, the kind people use when trying to cover up deep discomfort. "I love my husband. I'd never hurt him." And just like that, she had flipped the entire scene, casting herself not as the betrayer but as the wounded party. A victim. That was the moment Paula reached her limit. With calm precision, she took a deep breath, opened her purse, and pulled out her phone. Without a word, she tapped the screen and held it up for everyone to see. The video began playing. I didn't even need to look. I already knew exactly what was coming. Lorna's voice echoed through the room, laughing, whispering, groaning, carrying all the damning evidence. Nathan's voice followed, equally recognizable. It was unmistakable, inescapable. The room fell silent. The air itself seemed to vanish. Lorna froze in place. Her eyes darted from one face to another, searching for anyone who might stand with her, offer support, deny what they had just heard. No one did. The truth had hit with brutal clarity. No more fake stories. No more attempts to spin the narrative. She had been exposed completely, caught on camera without a shred of doubt. Nathan turned pale, visibly realizing how far and fast his life was unraveling. His reputation, his relationships, even his future, everything was slipping away. Lorna opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came. Her throat worked as she tried to swallow the panic rising within her. The last weapon in her arsenal, deception, was now useless. I stepped toward her, slowly, deliberately, closing the space between us. When I finally spoke, my voice was low and meant only for her. "Weren't you saying something earlier?" Her lips began to tremble. A single tear slipped down her cheek. For the first time in all the years we'd been together, she had no words. That silence, it was louder than any accusation. The room held its breath, a heavy stillness hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. Lorna stood motionless, pale-faced, her arms limp at her sides, her lips parting slightly like she might say something, anything, to undo what had just happened. But nothing came out. She had always been quick with a story, capable of weaving lies so convincing even I had believed them. But now she looked diminished, almost fragile. I allowed the silence to grow, to deepen. I wanted her to experience the full weight of what she'd done, the wreckage she had caused. Someone coughed. A few people shifted awkwardly. Even the ones who had been gossiping moments ago were now unsure of what to say. This had gone beyond scandal, it was a complete collapse of everything she had built. Then, suddenly, Lorna reached out and gripped my wrist tightly. "Please," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Let's leave. Just the two of us. We can talk this out." I turned my head, studying her face like she was a stranger I'd never met. And in many ways, she was. "Oh, you mean like the kind of talk you had with Nathan when no one else was around?" Her fingers dug into my arm, her grip desperate, her nails pressing into my skin like she thought she could hold me there by force. "This is all a mistake," she said quickly, panic taking over. "We can still fix this. Please." I didn't pull my arm away. There was no need. Because just then, Paula let out a sharp, sarcastic laugh that cut through the room. "Well, isn't this something?" she said with mock admiration. "You've got some nerve, Lorna. Really, you never stop trying, do you?" Lorna winced. Paula stepped closer, her presence heavy, commanding. My wife seemed to shrink under the weight of it. "You want to talk about mistakes?" Paula continued. "Let's talk about the one where you actually thought you could cheat on your husband and get away with it." The murmuring picked up again, voices filled with shock and realization. The crowd had turned on her completely. I could see it in their faces, disbelief, disappointment, even betrayal. Many had once stood by her, believed in her. That was no longer the case. Nathan looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. He didn't utter a single word. Smart move. He clearly understood that staying silent was his best chance to preserve the small shred of dignity he still had. Lorna, on the other hand, wasn't ready to give up. "I wasn't," she began, but I shut her down immediately. "Lorna, She froze, her eyes wide, lips snapping closed. I said just one word, but it carried the weight of so much more. Months filled with doubts, countless restless nights, and years spent believing in someone who had turned out to be a lie. That single word broke her. Her face crumpled, her composure slipping away. She turned fully toward me, gripping my shirt as if trying to anchor herself. Please, she pleaded, her voice trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. You've got to believe me. I made a mistake, okay? It didn't mean anything. It was just a stupid choice. I actually laughed. A raw, humorless laugh. Didn't mean anything? I echoed, shaking my head in disbelief. That's your excuse? I pointed toward Paula, still clutching her phone. The screen was frozen on a frame from that damning video, an image that captured the worst moment in Lorna's life. And yet it looked anything but meaningless. Her expression contorted with agony. It was a mistake, she murmured again. But I love you. I leaned in close enough that only she could hear the next words. No, Lorna. You love the idea of who I am. Then I finally stepped away. I gave her one last glance, the broken, desperate woman I had once promised my future to, and then I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. Outside, the night air felt fresh and sharp, like my first real breath in ages. Behind me, the party was unraveling, voices rising in confusion and anger, glass cracking underfoot. Inside, Lorna's ragged sobs echoed as she tried and failed to regain control. But out here, it was peaceful. I didn't hurry. There was no need. I strolled toward my car with calm, deliberate steps, my heartbeat steady for the first time since Paula's message had shattered my world. Then I heard them, footsteps. Bare feet pounding against pavement, frantic and uneven. Liam. Lorna's voice cracked the silence of the night. Wait. I didn't stop. I reached my car, opened the door, and slid into the driver's seat. Just as I was closing the door, she arrived, slamming her hands against the window in desperation. Please. Just let me talk to you. She was crying uncontrollably now. I gripped the steering wheel, torn. A part of me wanted to leave her there, let her face the wreckage she'd caused alone. But another part, the part that still remembered the woman I once loved, needed something final. I unlocked the door. She yanked it open and collapsed into the passenger seat, her entire body shaking. Her hair was wild now, strands stuck to her tear-streaked cheeks. The flawless makeup she'd worn earlier was smeared, mascara tracing dark rivers down her face. She wasn't glamorous anymore. She was vulnerable, stripped bare of all her masks. I leaned back in my seat, eyes fixed forward. You have 2 minutes. Her breath caught. Liam, She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. Talk. She recoiled, folding her hands into her lap. I know I ruined everything, she whispered. But it's not how it looks. A bitter laugh escaped me. Lorna, I watched the video. She inhaled sharply, blinking fast. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly. How many times? I asked, voice low. She hesitated. How? Many times. Her mouth opened, but no words came. I turned my head slowly until our eyes met. You don't even know, do you? The silence stretched, loud and suffocating. Eventually, she broke. Liam, please? She reached for my arm again. I still love you. I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. I'll do anything. I looked at her. You didn't just hurt me, Lorna. You destroyed us. She began shaking her head, desperation creeping in. No, we're not finished. We can come back from this. I'll start therapy. We can go to counseling. I stopped her with a single sentence. I already filed for divorce. She froze, mouth snapping shut. Every muscle in her body went still. And then the realization washed over her. Her chest began to rise and fall quickly, eyes wide and frantic, shadowed with something deeper, fear. Liam, she whispered, voice trembling, I don't have anywhere to go. I let those words hang in the air between us. Then, without a word, I reached into the center console and pulled out an envelope I had been keeping for weeks. I tossed it onto her lap. She stared at it, hesitant, her fingers shaking as she opened it and scanned the contents. Her breath came in shorter bursts as she read the words on the page. Her eviction notice. I had already transferred the house entirely into my name. Her name was no longer on the deed. A strangled sound came from her throat. She clutched the paper like holding it tighter could somehow undo it. You can't do this, she gasped. This is my home. No, I said, calmly starting the engine. It was our home. But the moment you brought another man into our bed, you destroyed it. Her breathing became erratic, eyes darting between the document and my face like she was searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. For the first time, Lorna had no escape left. I reached past her, opened the door, and told her to leave. She didn't budge. Liam, please, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I remained silent, just staring at her. And gradually, as the reality began to take hold, it clicked. Her expression crumbled. A raw, painful sob escaped her. She understood. There was no going back. Clutching the documents tightly against her chest, she stepped out of the car, shattered. I drove off, watching her figure grow smaller in the rearview mirror, and felt something I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever: liberation. I didn't glance back. Not when I rounded the next corner, not when my phone buzzed nonstop with desperate messages. Not even when I finally pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there in the stillness. For the first time in what seemed like ages, I felt unburdened. The weight of suspicion, of constantly questioning myself, of wondering why the woman I loved kept slipping away from me towards someone else, that was all gone. But I wasn't naive. I knew Lorna well. This wouldn't be the end. And I was right. The next morning, she was on my porch, waiting. Her hair was still tangled from the previous night, though she had changed into a soft sweater, the kind she always wore when we'd lounge on the couch during slow Sundays. The kind meant to evoke comfort and nostalgia. Her eyes were swollen, clearly from hours of crying. In her hands, she held a bundle of old photographs, snapshots from our wedding, vacations, holidays where our smiles were so big they looked painful. I stepped out of the car with a sigh. "Lorna." My voice was firm and cold. She winced at the tone. "Liam," she rasped. "I know I don't deserve to be here. But I'm asking, please, let me speak." I let out a breath through my nose, holding back the flood of emotions pressing behind my ribs. "You have 2 minutes." Her lips quivered, but she nodded. She moved closer, raising the photos between us like some fragile shield. "Look at these," she said, her voice thick and trembling. "Look at everything we shared. We were so happy, Liam. Truly happy. We can have that again." I didn't take the photos. I didn't need to. The man captured in those images, the one smiling at his wife like she was the center of his universe, he didn't exist anymore. "Lorna," I said, shaking my head slowly. "This isn't some storybook. There's no miracle ending waiting around the corner. What you did, it wasn't just betrayal. You lied. Repeatedly. And now you care only because you've lost control." Her face twisted with pain. "No," she choked out. "That's not true. I never stopped loving you. I was lost, Liam. I made a terrible mistake." A bitter chuckle escaped me. "A mistake is leaving the lights on overnight. What you did. You made a conscious choice. Repeatedly. For months, maybe longer." She gasped, her lips trembling. "But we can work through this," she insisted. "We can go to therapy. We can fix it." "You didn't want therapy when you were sneaking off with him," I interrupted sharply. Her mouth clamped shut. I could see the gears turning as she tried to find something, anything, to keep me from walking away. Then her demeanor shifted. She softened, her eyes welled with fresh tears. And in a whisper, she played the card she thought would save her. "I can't live without you." My gut clenched. I recognized this tactic all too well. The guilt trip. The emotional ploy. The last-ditch attempt to twist the blame. And years ago? It might have worked. But not now. I stepped forward slowly, making sure every word landed. "You've already been doing just that, Lorna. Living without me from the moment you decided he was more important." She inhaled sharply, as if I had struck her. But I wasn't finished. I leaned in slightly, my voice even and calm. "And now it's my turn." Then I walked past her and shut the door. She didn't knock. Didn't cry out. She just stood there, hollow and defeated. And for the first time, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Because Lorna had made her decision long before this moment, and now I had made mine. Weeks went by with no word from her. Maybe she finally grasped that there was truly nothing left to say. Maybe she believed that if she stayed away long enough, nostalgia would soften my resolve and I'd invite her back into my life. But there's something about burning bridges. Once the smoke clears, what remains is only ashes. I was finished living in the aftermath. Starting over was no easy feat. After years of being part of a couple, I found myself completely on my own. There were no more midnight texts from Lorna, no familiar morning sounds in the kitchen, no shared routines to remind me daily of the life I had to leave behind. The silence felt overwhelming. Yet it wasn't hollow. I began to rediscover myself, who I had been before her. I reconnected with old friends, took spontaneous trips, and spent my time on things that genuinely brought me joy. And one quiet evening, as I sat on my porch sipping a cold beer, a realization washed over me. I was no longer waiting. Not for an apology. Not for closure. And definitely not for her. I had finally closed the chapter with Lorna, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I didn't feel the need to pause and check if she was still lingering behind the door. That was her final farewell. The last moment I ever saw her didn't carry any cinematic weight. No explosive argument, no emotional collapse in public. It happened so simply. I was leaving a coffee shop, a fresh cup in my hand, when I noticed her across the road. She was standing next to Nathan, yes, him. But her posture, stiff and guarded, said everything. The illusion she had spun around him had already begun to unravel. She caught sight of me, and in that brief instant I glimpsed something flicker on her face. Regret, subtle but unmistakable. Still, it didn't matter anymore. I didn't slow down, didn't nod, didn't offer a single sign that I'd seen her. I kept walking. That was the final time Lorna Monroe would ever appear in the story of my life. The beginning of something new. If you had asked me 12 months earlier whether I could ever be fine without her, I probably would have hesitated. I might have still been tangled in a version of love that shackles instead of sets free, the kind that convinces you suffering is just part of the deal. But now? Now I saw it clearly. True love doesn't leave you shattered. It doesn't make you question your value or force you to fight just to be treated decently. And as I drove home that afternoon, the breeze slipping through the open windows, my future stretching out in front of me, I found myself smiling. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that party. I was the one who had walked out. And I never looked back.